Denmark sits at the crossroads of Europe and the Arctic, a geopolitical chess piece that controls northern gateways destined to shape our future. This is a land where medieval fortresses stand guard over bicycle lanes, where transparency in government isn't a slogan but a physical reality, and where even the sea itself seems to bend to human wisdom rather than human will. From Copenhagen's stunning blend of historic resilience and modern innovation to windswept islands where time moves at nature's pace, Denmark offers something extraordinary, proof that a nation can be both globally influential and deeply humane. Here, social stability isn't maintained through force, but through trust, an invisible infrastructure more powerful than any wall or weapon. And if you're ready to discover how one small kingdom became a giant in everything that truly matters, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to learn will change how you see the world forever. Denmark occupies approximately 43,094 square kilometers of northern Europe, but to describe it merely by size would be like judging a diamond by its weight. Nestled between the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, this Scandinavian kingdom consists of the Jutland Peninsula and an archipelago of 443 named islands, of which 72 are inhabited. But here's what the maps don't immediately reveal. Denmark's geographic position is nothing short of strategic genius. The kingdom guards the narrow straits connecting the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, waterways that have determined the fate of empires for millennia. Copenhagen sits at the gateway to the Baltic, a maritime choke point that once made Denmark a naval superpower and today positions it as a crucial player in European security architecture. The Øresund Bridge, connecting Denmark to Sweden, isn't just infrastructure. It's a physical manifestation of the nation's role as connector, mediator, and bridge builder in the truest sense. But Denmark's geography extends far beyond its European heartland. Through Greenland and the Faroe Islands, the Kingdom of Denmark stretches across nearly 2.2 million square kilometers and into the Arctic Circle, granting it influence in the rapidly evolving geopolitics of the far north. As climate change opens new shipping routes and reveals untapped resources, Denmark's Arctic territories transform it from a regional player into a global power broker. This is geography as destiny, but only for those wise enough to recognize it. The Danish landscape itself tells a story of humility and adaptation. There are no dramatic mountain ranges here, no vast wilderness to conquer. The highest natural point, Hygge, rises just 170.86 meters above sea level. Instead of fighting against nature's modesty, the Danes have mastered it, turning gentle hills, coastal plains, and thousands of kilometers of shoreline into a carefully tended garden of sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and breathtaking natural beauty. The land shaped the people, and the people in turn learned to shape the land, gently, respectfully, and with eyes fixed centuries into the future. The capital city of Copenhagen houses roughly 1.3 million people in its metropolitan area, but numbers alone cannot capture what makes this city extraordinary. Built on patience rather than spectacle, Copenhagen emerged from its Viking origins as a fishing village in the 10th century to become Denmark's capital by the 15th century. The very name, Copenhagen in Danish, means merchant's harbor, revealing its commercial DNA. But beneath Copenhagen's calm, orderly surface lies something remarkable. A city that has survived bombardment, plague, fires, and occupation without losing its soul. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British Navy bombarded Copenhagen in 1807, destroying much of the city. The Danes rebuilt. When Nazi Germany occupied Denmark in 1940, Copenhagen became the center of one of history's most extraordinary resistance movements, a largely nonviolent campaign that saved nearly all of Denmark's Jewish population. The city endured. When modern urban sprawl threatened its character, Copenhagen didn't tear down its past. It integrated bike lanes, pedestrian zones, and green spaces into the historic fabric, creating what urban planners worldwide now study as the gold standard of livable cities. Walk through Copenhagen today, and you'll notice something absent in most capitals: fear-driven architecture. There are no concrete barriers blocking government buildings, no militarized checkpoints creating distance between power and people. This isn't naivete, it's the physical manifestation of trust. During the Cold War, Denmark built extensive civil defense systems, underground shelters capable of protecting its population. But these preparations existed quietly, without transforming the city into a fortress. Preparedness without paranoia, that's the Copenhagen way. The city's bike culture exemplifies this philosophy perfectly. With over 400 kilometers of dedicated bike lanes and bicycles outnumbering cars, Copenhagen demonstrates that progress isn't always about speed or size. Sometimes it's about choosing the right scale for human flourishing. When you see business people in suits, parents with children, and elderly residents all cycling through rain and snow, you're witnessing something profound. A society that has engineered equality into its transportation infrastructure. Standing on the small island of Slotsholmen in central Copenhagen, Christiansborg Palace represents a governance model so unusual that most political scientists struggle to find comparisons. Here, under one roof, all three branches of Danish government function: the Parliament, the Prime Minister's office, and the Supreme Court. The Queen's royal reception rooms are here too, though the monarch no longer resides in the palace. Think about what this physical arrangement means. In most nations, power hides behind distance, separate buildings, separate districts, walls and security cordons creating physical and psychological barriers between citizens and authority. Not in Denmark. Here you can walk through public courtyards where members of parliament grab coffee, where tourists photograph the same doorways that ministers use daily. The palace ruins beneath the current building, dating back to Bishop Absalon's castle from 1167, remain open to visitors, literally showing the archaeological layers of Danish power, transparent even in its history. This accessibility isn't accident or oversight, it's ideology made concrete. When power doesn't hide, corruption finds fewer shadows to inhabit. When officials encounter citizens in daily life, Rather than motivated isolation, policies stay grounded in reality. The Tower of Christiansborg stands 106 meters tall, the highest point in Copenhagen, offering free public access to observation decks where you can survey the entire city. Even the symbol of power invites you to share its perspective. The economic implications are significant. Denmark ranks among the world's least corrupt nations, typically first or second in Transparency International's rankings, not through harsh enforcement alone, but through a culture where transparency is literally built into the architecture of governance. This creates an environment where businesses can operate with minimal bureaucratic friction, where contracts are honored, and where long-term economic planning becomes possible because political institutions remain stable and predictable. Stand along the colorful 17th century waterfront of Nyhavn, and you're looking at Denmark's relationship with its own history. These bright townhouses, painted in yellows, reds, blues, and greens, once housed sailors, merchants, and less reputable establishments. This was Copenhagen's rough edge, where ships brought exotic goods and dangerous ideas, where Hans Christian Andersen lived and wrote some of his most famous fairy tales, including The Little Mermaid and The Princess and the Pea. What Denmark did with Nyhavn reveals national character. Rather than erasing this working-class harbor or fossilizing it into a lifeless museum, the Danes transformed it into a vibrant social space while honoring its origins. The warehouses became restaurants and cafes, but the architecture remained authentic. The old wooden ships still dock here, not as props, but as functional vessels and living museums. Andersen's legacy isn't relegated to plaques and statues. It's woven into the living culture of storytelling, literature, and publishing that makes Denmark one of the world's most literate nations. This approach extends throughout Danish society. The economy has transformed from agriculture and fishing to become one of the world's leaders in pharmaceuticals, renewable energy, shipping, and design. Yet traditional industries remain respected and viable. Danish farming isn't industrial monoculture, but increasingly organic, sustainable, and integrated with environmental protection. The Danish shipping company Maersk moves roughly 1 in 7 containers shipped globally, a maritime empire built on the foundation of centuries of seafaring tradition. The lesson, transformation doesn't require amnesia. You can honor what you were while becoming something new. This cultural continuity creates social stability that economists increasingly recognize as valuable as any natural resource. Perched on a rock in Copenhagen Harbour since 1913, the Little Mermaid statue is one of the world's most photographed monuments. She's also one of the smallest and most peculiar, just 1.25 meters tall and weighing 175 kilograms. This bronze figure represents Denmark's choice to define itself through vulnerability rather than triumph. Consider what most nations place in prominent public positions: generals on horseback, conquerors with swords raised, eagles with talons extended, flames of eternal glory. Denmark chose a sad mermaid longing for something she cannot have, sacrificing her voice for love, caught between two worlds, embodying loss and hope simultaneously. This isn't weakness, it's sophisticated cultural strategy. The Little Mermaid draws millions of visitors annually to reflect on Andersen's tale of sacrifice, transformation, and the pain of not quite belonging. She's been vandalized repeatedly, beheaded twice, had her arm sawed off, been painted, and politically protested, yet always Denmark carefully restores her. Why? Because she represents something the Danes understand deeply. That resilience comes through emotional honesty, not emotional suppression. Andersen himself embodied this Danish paradox. Born in poverty in Odense in 1805, he became globally famous, but never fully comfortable in either high society or his humble origins. His fairy tales, often dark, psychologically complex, and emotionally devastating, became Denmark's most successful cultural export, translated into over 150 languages. The Danes didn't demand triumphant national epics. They elevated stories about ugly ducklings, match girls freezing to death, and mermaids who dissolve into sea foam. This cultural comfort with melancholy and complexity creates something valuable: emotional resilience. Denmark consistently ranks among the world's happiest nations not because Danes ignore hardship, but because their culture provides frameworks, through storytelling, community structures, and social safety nets, for processing difficulty without despair. Rosenborg Castle, built in the Dutch Renaissance style by King Christian IV in the early 17th century, houses the Danish crown jewels, royal regalia, and an extraordinary collection of royal artifacts spanning 400 years. But here's what makes it significant: these aren't dusty relics. The crown jewels stored in Rosenborg's basement treasury are still used during royal ceremonies. The coronation throne, carved from narwhal tusks, still serves symbolic functions. History here isn't past, it's continuous. The Danish monarchy represents one of the world's oldest continuous institutions, tracing its lineage back over 1,000 years to Gorm the Old. Yet it survives precisely because it adapted. The absolute monarchy became constitutional in 1849. Royal power became ceremonial. The lavish royal lifestyle became modest by monarchical standards. Today's Danish royal family bicycles through Copenhagen, shops in regular stores, and maintains a public profile that balances dignity with accessibility. This adaptation has economic and social value. The monarchy provides continuity and national symbolism without the instability of elected heads of state or the expense of maintaining actual political power. Queen Margrethe II, who reigned from 1972 to 2024 before abdicating in favor of her son King Frederik X, became a working artist, illustrator, and costume designer, a monarch who created rather than merely consumed. The constitutional monarchy also embodies something subtle: institutional memory. Governments change every few years, but the crown provides continuity, quietly maintaining diplomatic relationships, supporting cultural institutions, and symbolizing national identity across generations. This stability attracts investment, tourism, and international goodwill, worth far more than it costs to maintain. The marble church, Frederick's Church, with its massive dome inspired by St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, began construction in 1749. It wasn't completed until 1894, 145 years later. The Church of Our Saviour, with its external spiral staircase winding around its spire, was built between 1682 and 1696, but its famous tower wasn't added until 1752. These aren't stories of incompetence or failure. They're evidence of a culture comfortable with delayed gratification, a society that understands some achievements require generations, not electoral cycles. When funding ran out for the marble church, the Danes didn't demolish it or settle for a cheaper alternative. They waited. When economic conditions improved 150 years later, they completed it according to the original vision. This generational thinking permeates Danish society. Environmental policies plan for 2050, 2100, and beyond. Educational investments focus on developing human potential over decades, not test scores by next year. Infrastructure projects prioritize sustainability and longevity over quick wins. The economic manifestation of this thinking appears in Denmark's approach to renewable energy, beginning serious investment in wind power in the 1970s. When it was expensive and unproven, Denmark maintained commitment through decades when cheaper fossil fuels dominated. Today, wind power provides over 50% of Denmark's electricity, and Danish companies like Vestas and Ørsted lead the global renewable energy industry. This is what happens when societies think in cathedral time rather than quarterly earnings. Tivoli Gardens, opened in 1843, is the world's second oldest operating amusement park. But calling it merely an amusement park misses its significance. Tivoli represents Denmark's sophisticated understanding that happiness isn't frivolous, it's fundamental infrastructure requiring design, maintenance, and investment. Walk through Tivoli's meticulously landscaped gardens, past its historic wooden roller coaster, still operating since 1914, through concert halls and restaurants blending old and new, and you're experiencing something the founder Georg Carstensen understood. Joy is a social good worth protecting and cultivating. Tivoli influenced Walt Disney when creating Disneyland, but there's a crucial difference. Tivoli sits in the heart of Copenhagen, integrated into daily urban life, accessible by bike or public transit, part of the city's social fabric rather than an isolated fantasy destination. This integration of pleasure into daily life reflects broader Danish cultural practices. Hygge, untranslatable, but roughly meaning cozy contentment, generous vacation policies, 5 weeks minimum annually, work-life balance enforced through culture and policy, and public spaces designed for lingering rather than transiting. The economic logic is compelling. Happy, healthy workers are more productive. Societies with strong social cohesion have lower crime, healthcare, and security costs. When people trust their neighbors and institutions, transaction costs decrease across the entire economy. Denmark's high taxes support extensive social services, but they also create a stable, educated workforce, excellent infrastructure, and social trust that money alone cannot buy. Castle, built between 1662 and 1725, is one of Northern Europe's best-preserved star fortresses. Its thick earthwork walls, moats, and strategic positioning once made it a formidable military installation, protecting Copenhagen from naval assault. Today, it's a public park where residents jog, walk dogs, and picnic on the very ramparts designed to repel invaders. This transformation from military to civilian use without demolition or abandonment symbolizes Denmark's evolution from hard power to soft power. The fortress remains functional, it still houses military facilities, but its primary function now serves peace rather than war. You can walk freely through Castle's grounds, past the historic buildings, along the moats where swans glide, beneath trees planted generations ago. Denmark maintains a professional military and contributes to NATO operations, but its international influence increasingly comes through diplomatic mediation, development aid, and cultural exchange. Danish peacekeeping forces, humanitarian assistance, and commitment to international law create influence disproportionate to the nation's size. This approach has economic dimensions. Denmark's defense spending is modest compared to larger nations, freeing resources for education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Yet by maintaining strong international relationships and contributing meaningfully to collective security, Denmark ensures its interests remain protected without bearing unsustainable costs. From above, Brøndby looks like a mandala or flower, 292 small gardens arranged in perfect circles, creating stunning geometric patterns visible from the air. Built in the early 1970s, these allotment gardens transformed unused land into equal plots where Copenhagen residents could grow food, relax, and build small summer cottages. The circular design isn't merely aesthetic, it's philosophical. Every plot is visible to others, no one occupies a more prestigious position. The shared central areas encourage community. The equal division of land manifests Denmark's commitment to social equality in physical form. This principle of designed equality extends throughout Danish society. The welfare state isn't just safety net programs, it's an entire philosophy that prosperity should be broadly shared, that extreme inequality damages society, and that collective investment in human potential benefits everyone. Denmark's Gini coefficient, measuring income inequality, ranks among the world's lowest. The gap between highest and lowest incomes is narrower than almost anywhere else. Critics call this system inefficient, claiming high taxes stifle entrepreneurship. Yet Denmark consistently ranks among the world's easiest places to do business, most competitive economies, and most innovative nations. How? Because when everyone receives excellent education, healthcare, and opportunities regardless of parental wealth, the entire society's talent pool expands. Innovation comes from collective human capital, not just a privileged few. The Royal Danish Library's modern extension, called the Black Diamond for its dark granite facade, opened in 1999 as a striking addition to the historic 17th century library. This architectural juxtaposition, cutting-edge contemporary design merged with centuries-old buildings, perfectly illustrates Denmark's approach to knowledge, honor tradition while embracing innovation. Inside, the Black Diamond houses Denmark's national collection, every book published in Danish since the 15th century, manuscripts dating back to the Middle Ages, and modern digital archives preserving contemporary culture. But it's also a vibrant public space with concert halls, exhibitions, and waterfront access. Knowledge isn't hoarded, it's shared. Denmark invests over 7% of GDP in education, among the world's highest rates. University education is free for Danish and EU students, with the government actually paying students a monthly stipend to pursue higher education. This isn't charity, it's strategy. In a small nation without vast natural resources, human capital becomes the most valuable asset. The results are measurable. Denmark ranks consistently high in innovation indices, patents per capita, and research output. Danish companies lead in pharmaceuticals, Novo Nordisk, shipping, Maersk, renewable energy, Ørsted, Vestas, and design. These aren't lucky accidents, they're the predictable outcomes of generations of educational investment. The Copenhagen Opera House, opened in 2004, emerged from a donation by shipping magnate Maersk McKinney Møller. Built on the former site of Frederiksholm Shipyard, it represents transformation from industrial production to cultural production, from private wealth to public good. With its stunning waterfront location facing Amalienborg Palace across the harbor, its advanced acoustic design, and its architectural boldness, the Opera House demonstrates how culture drives economic development. Cultural tourism generates billions in revenue. Creative industries employ significant portions of the workforce. Arts education develops cognitive skills applicable across all professions. A But Denmark's cultural investment goes deeper than economics. The Nordic tradition of incorporating art and design into everyday life, from furniture to flatware, buildings to bridges, reflects a belief that beauty isn't luxury for the wealthy but fundamental to human dignity. This philosophy influences everything from social housing, which in Denmark can be architecturally stunning, to public transportation, which prioritizes aesthetics alongside function. Danish design became globally influential precisely because it democratized good design, making it accessible rather than exclusive. When you sit on an Arne Jacobsen chair, walk through a school designed by Jorn Utzon, or use a piece by Georg Jensen, you're experiencing design philosophy that rejects ornamentation for its own sake, while insisting that functional objects should be beautiful. Rosenborg Castle, built between 1574 and 1585 in Helsinge, served dual purposes that illuminate Danish strategic thinking. Practically, it controlled the narrow Øresund Strait between Denmark and Sweden, allowing Denmark to collect tolls from every ship passing between the North Sea and Baltic, a source of enormous wealth. Mythically, Shakespeare immortalized it as Elsinore, the setting of Hamlet, making this Danish fortress part of global cultural imagination. Control the narratives, control the imagination, control the waterways, control the commerce. Denmark understood both. The sound dues collected at Kronborg funded Danish power for centuries, making Denmark-Norway one of Europe's wealthiest kingdoms. Even after the tolls ended in 1857, Kronborg remained valuable as UNESCO World Heritage Site, tourist destination, and reminder of Denmark's historical significance. This dual nature, practical and mythic, characterizes much of Danish heritage. The Vikings weren't just brutal raiders, they were also traders, explorers and settlers who established kingdoms from Normandy to Russia. Their legacy in Denmark is celebrated but contextualized, neither whitewashed nor glorified. The National Museum of Denmark presents Viking history with scholarly rigor, showing both achievements and violence, trade routes and slave raids. This honest relationship with history creates credibility. When Denmark addresses contemporary issues, immigration, integration, social policy, it does so without pretending its past was perfect, while also drawing on genuine traditions of exploration, adaptation, and cross-cultural exchange. Frederiksborg Castle in Hillerød, originally built in the early 17th century as a royal residence, suffered devastating fire in 1859. The rebuilding effort, funded by both private donations, primarily from brewer J.C. Jacobsen of Carlsberg fame, and public support, created not just a restored castle, but the Museum of National History. This response to catastrophe reveals essential Danish character. When crisis strikes, the solution is collective action, not individual heroism or state control alone. The blend of private philanthropy and public purpose, local initiative and national coordination created something more valuable than the original castle, a shared cultural institution belonging to all Danes. This pattern appears throughout Danish history. When coastal flooding threatened lives and livelihoods, the response was cooperative dike building and water management systems that required collective discipline and shared maintenance. When industrialization disrupted traditional livelihoods, the response was cooperative movements in agriculture, retail, and manufacturing that allowed small producers to compete while maintaining independence. The modern welfare state emerged from this tradition of collective problem-solving rather than being imposed from above or demanded from below. It's why Danish social programs maintain broad support across the political spectrum. They're understood not as government dependency, but as shared insurance that everyone pays into and everyone benefits from. Ribe, founded around 700 CE, is Scandinavia's oldest existing town. Walking its medieval streets, past half-timbered houses dating to the 1500s, alongside the river where Vikings once docked their ships, you're not in a preserved historical theme park. You're in a living town where people work, raise families, and continue traditions spanning 1,300 years. Ribe Cathedral, begun in 1150, still holds services. The night watchman still walks the streets singing traditional songs, a tradition dating back centuries, but Ribe also hosts modern businesses, contemporary art, and current social life. History here isn't performance, it's continuity. This continuity creates something psychologically and economically valuable: rootedness. In an era of radical disruption and constant change, places like Ribe anchor identity and provide perspective. When your town has survived Viking raids, medieval plagues, religious wars, and modern globalization, you develop long-term resilience and skepticism toward claims that this time everything is different. The economic value manifests through cultural tourism, but also through retained local knowledge, traditional crafts, conservation techniques, historical understanding that can't be learned from books. Ribe's preservation of its character while adapting to modernity offers lessons applicable far beyond one small Danish town. The Infinite Bridge, a circular walkway extending into the sea near Aarhus, serves no practical purpose. You walk out, you walk around, you return. It doesn't transport you anywhere. It doesn't protect anything. It exists purely for the experience of being surrounded by sky and sea, for the sensation of walking on water, for contemplating infinity. In most cultures, this would be frivolous, resources wasted on purposeless construction. In Denmark, it's profound, recognition that human needs include beauty, contemplation, and experiences that serve no purpose beyond their own existence. Not everything must be productive. Not every moment must be optimized. This philosophy, seemingly impractical, actually produces practical benefits. A society that values experiences over mere consumption creates different economic priorities: sustainable tourism over mass tourism, quality of life over GDP maximization, long-term environmental protection over short-term resource extraction. Denmark's environmental leadership, carbon neutrality goals, renewable energy dominance, sustainable agriculture, emerges partly from this philosophical foundation. If you believe nature has value beyond its utility to humans, you protect it differently. If you believe experiences matter as much as possessions, you build a different kind of economy. Øresund Art Museum, crowned by Olafur Eliasson's Rainbow Panorama, a circular walkway with colored glass creating ever-shifting views of the city, demonstrates art's power to transform perception. As you walk through different colors, the city transforms: red, yellow, green, blue. Same buildings, different reality. This installation embodies something essential about Danish cultural openness: recognition that perspective shapes reality, that what you see depends on where you stand and what lens you view through. This might seem obvious, but its political and social implications are profound. A culture that embraces multiple perspectives creates space for disagreement without destruction, for diverse viewpoints without demanding uniformity. Denmark's parliamentary system, with proportional representation ensuring minority voices are heard, reflects this principle institutionally. Media plurality laws preventing monopoly control reflect it in public discourse. The economic implications matter too. In global business, understanding different cultural perspectives is essential. Denmark's small size and global integration created necessity. Danes must understand other languages, cultures, and perspectives to thrive. This produced a workforce exceptionally skilled at cross-cultural communication, making Denmark a hub for international organizations and multinational corporations. Rosenborg Museum, half buried in the landscape near Aarhus, uses architecture to connect human history with geological time. Its grass-covered roof continues the hillside, making the building inseparable from the land. Inside, exhibits trace human presence in Denmark from the last ice age to the present, a span of 15,000 years. This perspective, thinking in millennia rather than quarters or election cycles, shapes Danish environmental policy, urban planning, and social investment. When you understand human civilization as a brief moment in geological time, you develop humility about your ability to control nature and urgency about protecting what remains. Mons Klint, white chalk cliffs rising 128 meters from the Baltic Sea, formed 70 million years ago when Denmark lay beneath tropical seas. The migrating Rubjerg nude lighthouse, slowly moving as coastal erosion claims the land beneath it, reminds Danes that landscapes change despite human wishes. Grenen, where the North Sea and Baltic Sea meet in visible turbulence, shows natural forces too powerful to tame. Denmark's response to these geological realities, coastal protection through sand replenishment, managed retreat from vulnerable areas, adaptation rather than futile resistance, demonstrates wisdom applicable far beyond Denmark. Climate change will force every nation to make similar choices: fight nature or work with it, deny change or adapt to it, protect everything or prioritize what matters most. Bornholm, a rocky island in the Baltic Sea closer to Sweden and Poland than to the rest of Denmark, maintains distinct identity through isolation. Its round churches, unique among Danish architecture, were built as fortresses against medieval pirates. Its smoked herring and artistic communities create local culture different from mainland Denmark. The Faroe Islands, even more remote, autonomous territory in the North Atlantic halfway between Iceland and Norway, preserve another version of Danish identity. Here, waterfalls plunge directly into the ocean, villages cling to impossibly steep coastsides, and nature dominates human presence. These islands represent Denmark's choice not to abandon or fully develop its periphery, but to support it, maintaining connection while respecting difference. The Faroese govern themselves in most matters, conducting diplomacy in their own language, managing their own economy, yet remain linked to Denmark through shared history and mutual benefit. This approach, unity without uniformity, connection without control, offers alternatives to both imperial domination and complete independence. It's messy, complicated, and requires constant negotiation. It's also surprisingly durable and peaceful. The economic costs are real. Supporting remote communities requires infrastructure investment and subsidies that pure market logic wouldn't justify. But the returns in cultural diversity, maritime territories, renewable energy potential, and geopolitical positioning increasingly appear worthwhile as Arctic importance grows. And so we reach the end of our journey through Denmark. But truly, this is just the beginning of understanding what this remarkable nation offers the world. We've walked through palaces where power wears no walls, gardens where equality is planted into the earth, and bridges that lead nowhere except inward. We've witnessed how a small kingdom became a giant through choices that most nations consider impossible, choosing transparency over secrecy, equality over hierarchy, long-term vision over short-term gain, and trust over fear. If this journey resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our explorations of the world's most fascinating places and the wisdom they offer. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to think bigger, plan longer, and live more intentionally.